right, so we'll jump right in. Folks, I'd like to welcome Robert Politzer, founder and CEO of Green Street Global Asset Management. Welcome, Robert.
Thank you, Bill. Great to be here.
Very good. Really appreciate you taking the time here today to discuss your success in your field. And I spent some time going through your background. Robert, what stood out right away is how early you were in the green building space before it became mainstream, before it was all the rage.
Yeah,
So, yeah, what was that like in so early into this movement, green movement? Um, what was that like for you? Were you
yeah.
just one and you were standing out? Nobody knew they were going, but you did. What was that like?
That's a great question. So I started my first Green Street company at the end of 1998, and initially started it as a environmental remediation company, and
Yeah.
uh, and then in at the end of 1999, I first learned about green building, and I really fell in love with the concept. I've been an environmentalist for years and years. Ever since my youth, I'm passionate about this planet,
Yeah.
frankly, and but I also love real estate. And I'm in New York City. I mean, needless to say, one of the great cities of the world, amazing real estate. And so, learning about green building, I fell in love with the concept, and then pivoted from doing this kind of lead abatement, asbestos abatement, and type of work. And we got an opportunity to do a first green building project with a very wealthy a very very wealthy guy who owned a very high end condo down in Soho, and would you
Okay.
believe it? But it was on Green Street, Greene Street.
Aha.
And so we started doing this project. It was a one off. And at that time, ironically, I was working with two other partners, and we were working under the name, a company called Healthy Home Environmental. And we
Hmm.
tried to trademark it, but it was all fully trademarked at that time because healthy was becoming a big thing, healthy buildings and all that. So
I
we
see.
couldn't use healthy in the name, and our very arrogant, snooty marketing firm we were working with on Green Street. They had their office on Green Street. They were coming up with like really stupid names like Indian Nation and all kinds of
Yeah.
stupid names. So I'm like, at one night I'm tossing and turning, and all of a sudden, bang! It just hits me. Wow, what about Green Street? Not with the extra E, just green, color green, Green Street, because that
Yeah.
seems to really express between the color green, but then rooting it in street and real estate and hardcore
Perfect.
feet on the ground. Right, it just seemed to make perfect sense to me, and so so we had a subsequent meeting. I'll never forget this meeting with this firm. Their arrogant owner of the company was sitting right next to me, and they're going around the room giving out their ridiculous names they want for the company. And I said, "Well, I've got a name that I came up with." And the guy turns to me and says, "Well, yeah, what is that?" And I said, "Green Street." And this guy almost got up out of his chair. He was
Okay.
so outraged. Like, it can't be green. You cannot use green in the name. No way. It can't happen. And basically, I was so taken aback. A week later, we fired them, and so I loved the name. These other two partners, went their separate ways. So I carried on doing this environmental remediation work, and then I learned about green buildings, and
Yeah.
uh, and knew that I wanted to do it. Now, at that being said, at that time, we were the first green building company. Almost nobody knew of green. What people in New York City, especially in commercial real estate, knew of green was, California granola, crunchy environmentalists. Like, dude, you're in the wrong city. go move to San Francisco, and maybe there's somebody out there who will pay you all this extra money to do your green environmentalist work on my construction project. There was a lot of like outright hostility and
Yeah.
skepticism,
Right.
um, and that was hard, and yet for me, who I am an innovator. That's what gets me on. That's what, it really excites me. On the one hand, it was really, really difficult. On the other hand, I loved being the first green building company in New York City. That was like really cool. And,
Did you
and
have a
it did.
target on your back? Like leaders that break away from where everybody else is going, everybody can sometimes turn on them. And
Absolutely. I won't say that I had people turning on us. I just had a lot of no's, just
sure.
not
Yeah.
interested, and the greatest perception of all was that it cost a lot more money to do a
I
green
see.
building project than a conventional project. And on a certain level, that's true. However, with a really, really important caveat. So, um, so green building projects, even to this day, will oftentimes have a higher first cost. So, in other words, the
Yeah.
cost to do the construction will be somewhat higher than a conventional project. We're using conventional methods and means and products. However, when a green building project is done right, you will always have a higher performance building. You'll have a building that will be more energy efficient, more water efficient. It will have the tenants will perform better, especially for office buildings. There are all kinds of studies that document that. So the operating cost, long-term operating cost would be lower, but the first cost would be higher. So in
Hmm.
2001, I was the chair of the New York State Sustainable Business Task Force. And in fact, I remember being at a meeting. It was like the day after or a couple days after 9/11, and
Oh
we
my.
were all in
Yeah.
shock. And the chairman of the organization said New York City is on the verge of bankruptcy because taking out those towers, that was like the equivalent of
Sure.
taking out equivalent office space of all of downtown Pittsburgh. I mean, that's the scale of what happened. So,
Yeah. Hmm.
nonetheless, while I was working as the chair of that task force, we had a number of constituents come to us with a very same problem. They had green products and services that, yes, would have a higher first cost, but that would lower operating costs. And
Hmm.
um, and
Hmm.
98% of the time, they got a big fat no from prospective clients. So I really
I
came to
see.
understand the nature of the first cost problem for instituting green building projects. The second problem that I came to understand was that not only are clients not wanting to pay more, but a lot of clients just didn't even have the money at all to pay for substantial upgrades. So I came to understand that not only would there be a first cost problem to doing these green building, the high performance building upgrades, but there would also be a financing problem. And so soon thereafter, I started working on our own upgrade program. And so the
Yeah.
way I worked to address the first cost problem was to create a unique and very, very powerful cost saving solutions program that we would
I
begin
see. Cost savings. Yeah.
cost
Hmm.
savings. And so, which has evolved to where we're at today, where we have, I believe, a uniquely valuable cost savings solutions program that we begin with. So we will begin with an audit, and we have three different partners we work with. And so we're basically functioning the way we have always functioned, as essentially as a general contractor or construction project manager, right? Where we bring the program, we bring all of the incentives, the tax solutions, tax saving solutions, financing, the whole program.
Huh.
so that's also our unique proposition is we bring a holistic turnkey one-stop asset max
Got it.
program is the way what we call it today, our asset max program to optimize asset value, and it's a turnkey program. We bring every main component to our projects and to our clients.
Was
So
that the big breakthrough? That was the big breakthrough for your company to
that was
offer the totality of services?
Well, that was part of it, and I'll tell you where we're at with that in a moment.
Sure.
But the cost savings was really important. So that was over about a 7-year period. I sought out and created relationships with a number of different cost saving solutions, and so again, we've got three main partners we work with. One is a company that does utility audits. So they audit all the main expenses of a commercial building: gas, electric, water, sewer, waste, telecom. And they have their own in house auditors. They will do their audit for no upfront cost to the client and provide a high level report on their findings. 80% of the time, they find substantial overbilling or billing errors. And then they have a shared savings model. So with the client, so there's no upfront out of pocket cost to the client. Then
I
we
see.
we we created a relationship with another group that works on the operating costs for an operating business in the building. They have over 50 different cost centers that they can audit. So between the two of these partners, we have over 60 cost centers that we can
Nice.
audit, which means that we are always going to find, and I mean that truly, we are always going to find savings for our clients. Always, in
Wonderful.
one
Yeah.
form or another. Now, the best scenarios are those clients that own a building and have an operating business in the building. The business and the building have high operating costs, and that client is solely responsible for paying for all those high operating costs. So that's
Okay.
hotels, that's hospitals, that's assisted living, nursing homes. It's all the same scenario. So
Hmm.
with our cost
Yeah.
saving solutions program, where it's at today, along with our three main partners who we work with, we also have specialty tax companies to provide tax saving solutions. We work with companies that will source all of the utility rebates for implementing these green building upgrades. We have a vast financing network. We can finance any project. Almost always, we can finance it 100%. So these
Yeah.
are the components of our program that have been put in place over the years to
Nice.
provide this
Nice.
turnkey one-off program. But getting back to the problem of the first cost. So our point was, okay, sure, there will likely be a extra first cost problem, especially if you go down a conventional road. In other words, if you do the conventional thing of you hire an energy auditor and they're going to charge you $50,000 to $100,000 if you've got a fairly substantial building for their energy audit, they're going to give you this nice big fat book to which you probably will end up doing very little, if anything, to implement what they're recommending. You might not have the money, but you're going to be out of pocket paying them. Then you might make the next mistake of going out and hiring a general contractor who's going to then hit you up with their contract and they're going to be charging you up front. And so if you go down this conventional pathway and then you get, a building upgrade plan pulled together that's going to cost you more money,
Hmm.
then your team that you've gone to, this general contractor, this energy auditor, they probably don't have a financing network. They might know of one financing solution, for example, a CPACE financing, which is basically where the financing is attached to the building instead of the owner of the building. But the problem with that is that a lot of primary banks don't like it. In fact, they will not allow it if they have their loan on a property and they're in first position. They usually will not allow it because the CPACE acts essentially as it sits as a tax, so it gets paid in first position ahead of the bank. So a lot of banks don't
Oh,
like it. So you need to
Yeah.
have an array of options to finance your projects. Um, and
Yeah.
so and so with our cost saving solutions, we can usually save 15, 20, even up to 30% on operating costs
Mhm.
just by these cost saving solutions. And in that way, then we've started out saving client money. If there are unforeseen costs that come up in the next phase of our project, when we work to actually upgrade the building and work on the building, make it higher performing, we have those savings we can tap into if needed, right? So there won't be that first cost issue.
Yeah.
So that's how we solve that problem. We
Well,
solve the
so
financing problem. Yeah,
yeah,
sorry.
you've been leading this field that frankly there was no such thing as this field, say 30 years or so ago, and involved in sustainability. Uh, how I guess a basic question: where nice to
I
being
didn't get that
necessary?
question. I'm sorry. Could
Sure,
you repeat that, please?
sure. Uh, when did the green building industry shift from being kind of nice to have to necessary? We want green building. When did that shift happen? And what?
Well,
Uh,
I wouldn't say it went from nice to necessary. Where it went from was nice to programmatic. But because before 2001, there was
huh.
no green building certification program anywhere in the world. All actually for commercial buildings, there was none. Um, in Texas, um, Austin, Texas, created the first green building program in like the 1990s, but that was for single family residential. It wasn't for commercial. So it
Okay.
wasn't until 2001 when the LEED certification program by the U.S. Green Building Council was created. And LEED stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. That was the first green building certification program for commercial buildings, and that was a big step forward because then you finally had a program that sort of defined what a green building is and in a number of different levels. So that moved the needle quite a bit. But even so, even after that, it certainly wasn't at all perceived as necessary. Um, and
Hmm.
um, and it's so interesting you're bringing this up because this could be a whole separate podcast. But without getting too political, we were making great progress towards towards green building and towards decarbonization under the Inflation Reduction Act that was signed by the
Right.
Biden administration. It was the
Right.
largest investment in climate ever by any country in the world, and this current administration, quote unquote, came on board, and sure enough, they have tried to dismantle every component of the Inflation Reduction Act, every agency that's been involved with monitoring climate, and so they've kind of pushed this back somewhat. However, they're failing, of course, because you can't wish away this climate crisis. I'm very sorry. It's an inconvenient truth. This climate crisis is the greatest. It's the greatest environmental and existential threat to human civilization by far in human history. And in fact, I read yesterday, March of 2026 was the hottest month on record. On record, we keep setting records every single year. The hottest year, the second hottest year, the third hottest year, the most hurricanes, the most intense storms, the most,
Sure.
the wildfires out west, the wildfire that destroyed massive neighborhoods in LA, the drought, all these extreme weather events. So the point is that it's becoming more and more and more necessary. It's not completely there yet, but there are market forces at work that are pushing in that direction. And
Okay.
there's also ESG reporting requirements. especially
Okay.
for large corporations, which will push it, also in that direction. So where just I mark my word, when 2028 and beyond, we're going to see a major push for decarbonization, smart business
Yeah.
solutions for decarbonization, and we're going to be, frankly, in a great position because we've been working at this for years, and we have that private sector, market solution that turns these liabilities into profitable opportunities.
Well, let's talk about that one there. Yeah, business owners actually care about asset value.
That's right.
Yeah, tell us about that shift.
Yeah. Well, actually, we had a shift. It only happened about 6 months ago. For quite some time, we were messaging with our cost saving solutions and green building upgrade program, which was a mouthful, right? And
Okay.
because, what did I know about marketing? I'm a developer. I'm a, environmentalist. I'm an environmental engineer, and I knew very little about sales and marketing. And any entrepreneur who is listening to this podcast, I urge you that if you are not a sales and marketing expert, you absolutely have to have partnerships with those people who are. I've made that mistake over quite some time, thinking, "Oh, sales, what's the big deal? All you need to do is just educate. I just need to educate people about our program. That's all I need to do." And that couldn't be farther from the truth, especially now when everybody gets inundated so much every single day. You've got to be so sharp with your messaging, with your marketing. So we engaged in this new program called Clients on Demand, and I was looking to do a kind of an upgrade as part of this engagement, and I used my trusted, I think it was Chat GPT at the time. Now I'm more of a Claude aficionado, but I used AI to assist, and I came up with some new names for our program, and Asset Max came up, and I saw Asset Max. I thought, that's it. Finally, that's it. Because look, I'm a developer, and I understand first and foremost, it's about, for commercial real estate, it's all about value add. That's where 99% of all commercial real estate owners, that's where their mindset is. And I get that. I want the same thing with my properties. The difference with me is I understand the value of our Asset Max program to not only substantially increase the asset value, but also to eliminate the
Mhm.
climate and the carbon emission liabilities. That comes as an additional free component. So our Asset Max program then is designed step by step by step to add value. So,
Yeah.
you know, so
Financial performance. I mean,
yeah,
is that strictly the key to driving the adoption of this?
it's the main imperative
Yeah.
for everybody is enhancing financial performance. It's just that you get to enhancing financial performance isn't a straight line. There's
Hmm.
a lot of things, a lot of elements that come to optimizing, maximizing asset value. It's not just
Hmm.
it's not just net cash flow. It's also eliminating liabilities that can over time devalue your property, right? So let me give you an example. When I first moved to New York in the 1980s, and I started working with an environmental engineering firm that did
Hmm.
asbestos work, I heard numerous stories of building owners who, they were second generation, third generation building owners, which is very typical in New York. They were, going along, making their nice cash flow. And then the 1980s came up, and New York City passed some asbestos legislation requiring building owners to remove asbestos from their buildings. So all of a sudden, overnight, you had a huge liability that was attached to these buildings that had asbestos in them. Before the legislation, that wasn't a liability. Now with the laws, it was, so that any new buyer was going to subtract their estimate for the cost of remediating that asbestos to the offer they would make on the building. So it was devaluing the building.
Hmm.
That is what we're going to be is going to be facing more and more building owners for carbon emissions.
I
So in New
see.
York City, for example, there's like a law called Local Law 97 that took effect officially in 2024, but in 2030, the allowable emission limits for commercial buildings is going to drop down substantially. So whereas
Sure.
in the first 5 years of this law, only about 10% buildings had to comply. After 2030, it's going to be like 60 to 70% of all buildings. This is going to be thousands of buildings that are going to have to lower their carbon emissions, lower their building
Sure.
emissions, or else face fines and penalties. That is going to be devaluing their buildings. So they're going to need our Asset Max program to turn those liabilities into an opportunity. So for
Hmm.
us to then, upgrade their buildings to modern standards, make them much higher performing, much more efficient, much healthier buildings to live and work.
Right.
And so it's about, and again, we can do it with both a shared savings model on our cost savings, and we can do fully financed, zero net cost building upgrades. So, what can I tell you? I love our program. I believe Asset Max is by far the best program in the marketplace. And
Yeah.
and so yeah, so it's absolutely what clients want is optimizing asset value. It's just that most commercial building owners are the last thing from environmentalists, frankly, if I'm being really honest in my experience. Most of them want to just wish it away, but it's not going to, not only are there going to be more liability from legislation, but there's going to be market transformation as well. There are going to be, there's going to be large insurance companies and lenders are going to be requiring, low carbon, and carbon reduction, decarbonization. So
Sure.
it's coming. To your point, it's like being chipped away more and more to where the green building standards are going to become essentially, to your point, virtually required. That's where
Sure.
we're.
What are the biggest misconceptions that owners have about sustainability in general here?
Well,
I
first of
mean,
all, I
you.
think that there tends to be a political. It's really sad. It's really too bad. Environmental. We should get to the point where we've evolved beyond making the environmental issues political and partisan, because
Hmm.
listen, like it or not, we've got this one planet, and without this one planet to sustain our lives, there's no future for human civilization. That's just a
There's
fact.
nowhere to go.
There's
Yeah.
nowhere to go. Mars, whatever Elon Musk thinks about Mars, it's not going to be the new Earth. And so we're going to have to either figure out a way of living sustainably on planet Earth, or we're going to perish as frankly as a species. And I certainly don't want that to happen. I'm working against,
No.
to prevent that from happening. But most commercial building owners, they're the farthest thing from environmentalists, and to them,
Yeah.
it's just a nuisance. It's just those damn environmentalists wanting to get into their pockets. And that's why our program is so important, because our pitch is, listen, you can, say what you want. You can see the landscape. You can see how things are changing. And by the way, it's not just New York City. Boston has a decarbonization law. The state of Maryland has a decarbonization, very stringent decarbonization law. Other cities like Chicago, San Francisco,
Yep.
LA, throughout California, there are more and more and more states and cities that are enacting and requiring these low carbon mandates. So if you just simply accept that and then work with and let us do our magic, frankly, on turning that liability into an opportunity, and not and frankly just cooperate. Don't stand in the way of your own progress.
Yeah. Hmm.
That's where, but it's a lot easier now for us to get there. And because also what we do now is we start with our Asset Max audit with our three partners. That takes about 60 days. While we're doing the audit, we start with a first win. So we've got a couple of programs. One is a program that lowers employee taxes. will save an employer $1,000 a year per employee. It's absolute guaranteed money. The employees get additional health benefits. So it's a
Hmm.
no-brainer, very simple. This is a company that was bought out by Bain Capital. They're doing huge amount of traction. So we can start with that win, where we're going to show you that our program, provides value from the start. So we can start there. We also have a water meter technology, which is, you'll love this. So this is a water meter that will essentially squeeze out the air bubbles of the incoming air water that's coming from the utility that's filled with air bubbles. About 20% of the total volume of water that comes into a building is air. You're paying for air. This
Whoa.
water, yes, this water valve will squeeze out
And
the air from water. So when it goes through the meter's going to read a lower volume of water. Typically by 20 to 25%, we can get this meter fully installed and fully financed, 100% financing. It's guaranteed savings for as long as the valve stays in place, which can be years and years and years. So,
I
and then
see.
we've got other strategies as well. So we're going to start with a win. We're going to show you the money. While we're
Right.
showing you
Right.
what you don't know about your building and your operating business. And then when we provide that survey, that wide audit, that's when we're going to reveal to you how you've been sitting on a gold mine under your feet that you just haven't been aware of, that we have now
Tap
unearthed for
into.
you. Right.
Right. Now, you've mentioned prior that there's a significant amount of capital available for this approach, tax credits,
Yeah.
financing
Yep.
incentives. Could you break that
Yep.
down for us in a simple way?
Sure. So the financing strategies that we deploy
Hmm.
includes, number one, we have a partnership with a company called Zero Circle. I'll give a shout out to them. They have over 1,000 financing groups that finance energy efficiency projects. So
Hmm.
right there, we've got a huge network. Now those are going to be those are going to be loans. Okay. So then we also have CPACE, as I explained. Um, and that is there are a couple of groups that provide CPACE financing. It tends to be pretty low interest, and that can finance 100% of all the energy efficiency components of a building. So let's say you've got a developer and
Hmm.
they're short they've got a gap in their financing of 10 or 20%. That happens very often because usually developers have to stack all the capital to get all the money they need for their development projects. And oftentimes they're going out to different sources. So let's say you got this developer, they're like 20% short of what they need. Well, if they then will add some, more energy efficiency components to their building, all of those energy efficiency components can be financed through CPACE financing or these other financing options. So that is a way to bridge the gap. So CPACE is another. Then there are um, there's vendor financing. A number of our vendors will provide financing for
Okay.
their work. So that's another
Hmm.
financing solution.
Hmm.
And
And,
so, different financing solutions. And then, as I said, for our cost saving solutions, our vendors basically they finance the auditing work. So that's not something that the client has to come out of pocket for. So
nice.
there are
Well,
between that platform we work with. Oh, and there's also equipment lending and equipment financing groups. So Key Bank, for example, has a really active equipment financing program. They will finance energy efficiency upgrades 100%. And the reason you can get
okay.
100% financing is because what lenders know is that you're going to be making the building cash flow better. It's going to be worth more money. It'll cash flow better. It's a real safe investment. That's why you can get 100% financing.
But in your opinion, which of those opportunities, for tax credits, special financing, which is most underutilized today that
Right.
developers should focus on?
Right. So you've got the financing, right, to pay for the project. Then you have then there are utility rebates, and every state, and in some cases, city, like in the case of New York City and Con Edison, there are city based and state based rebates. And I would say that the rebates are the ones that are the least utilized. There's
Okay.
millions of dollars of rebates that do not get processed every year of available rebates.
Hmm.
And so because it's somewhat complicated, you need to work with a consultant that knows how to navigate through all that. But that so you got the utility rebates along with the financing. Then you've got tax. Then there are tax saving strategies. So, for example, if a in as part of a building upgrade program or development project, let's say a green building development project, there was a lot of engineering done on making the building more efficient and all that. You can use the enhanced R&D tax credit to get a substantial tax credit towards those extra expenses. Then for just about every commercial building, there is there are other tax strategies as well. And one is an accelerated depreciation program. So tax strategies, utility rebates, 100% financing, vendor financing. So you see, there are a
A lot
number
of
of different solutions available. This is what we bring to the table because we've been doing this a long time. We know every single option available
hmm
to clients to to optimize the asset value of their buildings and to do it in a way that does not put them deeply in debt.
Okay. Okay. So how would tenants influence this shift towards housing?
Yeah, that's a
Um,
great question. It's a really great
yeah,
question.
how's that?
Great question. Well, that is driving a lot of office renovation projects because especially the higher you get, so to speak, the more sophisticated and you know bigger, more well known the company is, the more their clients tend to demand working in green, healthy buildings. So that has driven the value of green offices up compared to conventional offices. And that's definitely another market. That's a market feature, a market force that is pushing the green building agenda, if you will.
Okay. So, lawsuits, that sort of thing. I mean, that's been in the news constantly for years.
Hmm.
Toxic buildings with the lawsuits involved with that.
Yeah,
So, yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
That's right.
what are corporate tenants demanding today? What are they demanding?
Oh boy. Well, I think you're asking what are they demanding in regards to high performance, healthy green building features,
Yeah.
right, in their buildings. Yeah. So again, it's going to depend a lot on their employees and how loud their employees are in demanding that they work in healthy, green, high performance buildings. And by the way, the U.S. Green Building Council has conducted a number of studies that have documented that. You remember we talked about the first cost problem? It costs a
Okay.
cup maybe 2%, 3% more to build and
Yes.
develop a green building, right? And then the operating costs would over time address that. But what the U.S. Green Building Council found is that employees that the higher productivity from corporate employees more than pays for that extra first cost.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. Can we circle back, if we can, Robert, to Local Law 97 and just
Yeah.
a brief explanation about that and why should investors care?
Well,
What has this done? Yeah.
if you are going to be investing in real estate in any of the five boroughs of New York City, and you're going to be buying a building above 25,000 square feet, it almost certainly will not be in compliance with Local Law 97 once 2030 hits. So if you plan on
Okay.
buying this year and holding for a period of time, that is going to become your liability to
Mhm.
bring the building into full compliance with the law. And so and this is, by the way, same thing in Boston. Same thing in the state of Maryland. The state of Maryland has an even more stringent decarbonization law than New York City does. So it's the same thing anywhere. If you're
Yeah.
buying in any of these local, state, or state markets that have decarbonization mandates, that's going to become a liability. If you're going to own it,
Mhm.
until when the mandates actually kick in.
What risks do owners face if they ignore these regulations? Fines, I'm
Fi-
sure. And yeah.
Fines for sure. And I'm trying to remember the terminology when buildings become um, functionally, uh, uh, you know, uh, can no longer operate with all the current rules, regulations, and start to become rapidly devalued, lose
Yeah.
value, rapidly, and that's projected to become a major factor all over the world. And keep this in mind: every large commercial building around the world and all of the owners of those buildings have the very same issues. Because
Sure.
climate is a global issue; it's not a local issue. And
And
they
how should they
also,
prepare?
I'm sorry.
How do it's a big thing to deal with here, but how should they prepare first off?
Well, it depends on which country they're in. So listen, if you were to talk to an asset, uh, you know, an owner of hotels or commercial buildings throughout Europe, they would be all over this now. I mean, this is not. This is now
Yeah.
essentially it's in Europe in some nations a little more than others, but it's essentially now pretty much mandatory that you have energy efficiency, green building features in every commercial building. So
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
European countries and those owners tend to be in better shape because they've already been working on this. They're already familiar with what needs to happen, and they've already done a lot of decarbonization.
I see. I see. What's in general, what's the biggest mistake that building owners, commercial building owners, are making right now? Say you're not in New York City. Um, is it just not doing anything and assuming things are going to keep going the way they are? That's kind of the human condition, I suppose. But what's your opinion of building owners of commercial?
Yeah, yeah. Well, first of all, staying completely, totally, comfortably in their box, right? Which is the extent to which they will take any kind of risk on doing anything that they aren't completely familiar with. And by the way, I understand that perspective. I've owned buildings. Bad things can happen, in a big way to commercial property owners. Let's make no mistake
Mhm.
about it. And everybody gets burned, and they have a good reason for being conservative and cautious. And yet,
Yeah.
it's like if, I don't know, I'll use the analogy that you had a business based on a flip phone and the
Mhm.
smartphone was developed, and you were adamant that it's got to be flip phones. It's got, I will not, I don't believe in these smartphones. Actually, you know what it is today? It's people who do not utilize AI at all. No, 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 I'm not. Oh, no way. I'm not going to do that. Oh, so when is that to say that when spreadsheets were developed, you wouldn't use a spreadsheet? You know, um, it's the same thing. It's staying too much in their small box and not understanding
Mhm.
that the world has changed, that there are huge opportunities, that there are a number of technologies, products and services, programs to upgrade their buildings to modern performance standards that will absolutely improve the asset value of their buildings along with increasing their net operating income. It's all available today. So staying in that box, number one, is the
Mhm.
danger. Number two, then, is when they venture out of their box, as I said before, it's hiring it's hiring a, excuse me, it's hiring an energy auditor
Yeah.
to, you know, to just do the energy audit. That's another big mistake. That puts you down a pathway, of the conventional route where you're going to spend tons of money and your worst fears are going to come true. You're going to spend a lot of money for relatively little impact. Your building performance is not going to improve as nearly as much as it could. And
Yeah.
so those are the two dangers, if you will, that I
Yeah.
see.
Thank you, Robert. Yeah. So I think I'd like to wrap it up here with um, your discussion of how things happened for you when you were in the corporate world and you walked in the office that morning
Oh, yes.
and with can you go through that whole thing for our
Yeah,
listeners
yeah,
here?
sure.
Very
Sure.
powerful.
Yeah, so I was the director of environmental engineering for Warren and Panzer Engineers in New York City. This was my first corporate job after I left being a high school teacher. And, I had a really great position. I had a really beautiful office, my own office, which in Manhattan, it takes you a while to get that, with windows, for God's sakes.
Okay.
Um, but there were things about this firm that I did not like. I was not working. I was doing environmental engineering, so again, work asbestos and lead, but doing the engineering of it, mold, that
Yeah.
kind of thing, which was okay, but it wasn't really turning me on. It didn't have a mission around it, and so I came to one morning. I walked into my office. I bought my favorite morning pastry. I sat down at my desk. I started eating. I think it was a cinnamon raisin roll, if I recall. And
Okay.
and had my first couple of bites and tasted great. And I had an epiphany, and then it occurred to me that my breakfast was going to be the highlight of my day in
Mm.
working at that firm. And I'm a missionite. I'm a mission driven person. And that was never, ever going to fulfill me. So I knew I had to leave then. And that began the process of me leaving that firm, meeting two other partners. That was when we started Healthy Home Environmental. That was my first foray into into entrepreneurship. And
Mm.
so it was, fortunately, I mean, I can't say it's been easy. It's been a hard road. Entrepreneurship is really, really hard. But I'll tell you what, as hard as it's gotten, and I've gotten into some crazy, insane situations that I wouldn't even want to repeat here. Oh my gosh. But that being said, even as hard as it ever got, I never, over 30, 25, 30, nearly 30 years, have I had a motivation problem.
Okay, there we go. That's incredible. There, you're making a huge difference all over New York City and around the country with your approach to green building. You're carrying the torch so that other people in the industry have a place where they can land. And you've been
Yeah,
doing it for a long time with great. So Robert, I want to thank you so much for sharing what you shared today. And yes, there's definitely more stuff in here where we could discuss this in more detail. But I want to thank you so much for sharing your business details, your approach on how you do things, and it's wonderful here to to hear your description of how your company's doing and how you can help other people that have commercial buildings to take
yep,
that step forward. So
absolutely. I
thank you
love it.
so
It's a
much,
passion of
Robert.
mine. I
And
love to
where can
love.
everybody find you?
So,
Yeah. Where can
so
everybody find you, Robert?
sure. So they can go to our website, greenstreetglobal.com. We also have a funnel which will explain our Asset Mex program. This is the best way. It's at go.greenstreetglobal.com. So they would then be able to listen to a 20-minute presentation masterclass that I did on our Asset Mex program. They only have to listen to 5 minutes of it, and then they can go ahead and register and then schedule an appointment with me. That would be the best way to go. Go.greenstreetglobal.com, or they can go to our website, which is greenstreetglobal.com. They can also find me on LinkedIn, Robert Politzer. They can find me on LinkedIn and connect with me
Okay.
there. Those would be the best ways. Otherwise, my email address is robert@greenstreetglobal.com.
Robert, thank you so much. Very good, sir.
My
All
pleasure,
right.
Bill. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, that's a wrap. So we'll go ahead and we'll send you Zoom snippets from this.